before we jump into?
No, not necessarily, but let's do a quick round of introductions. We'll start here in the room, and then we can we'll announce your first name, and then you can introduce yourself. Most of us know each other, but just so everybody knows everybody on the call. So I'm Deanna Jackson. I'm the Executive Director for Tri-County Water Authority. And to my right is Stacy Wilkins. Go ahead and introduce yourself, Stacy.
Stacy Wilkins, Administrative Assistant for Tri-County.
And Mark Raywell.
Oh, sorry. Amir.
Mayor Hussein, I'm with the project manager for Geosyntec. We are the engineering consultants for Tri-County Water Authority.
Okay, David.
David Armanasco from California Strategies.
Adriana.
Hi, I'm Adriana Barba from Wonderful.
Stacey Ann.
Stacey Ann Silva, New Current Water and Land, private landowner consultant.
Perfect. And then our call-in with the number ending in 0798.
Hey, it's Kathy Wood McLaughlin,
There it is. Okay.
working on projects with Atwell Island.
All right. Well, it is a small group today, so we'll move along in a fairly quick pace, and maybe even get out of here a little early. But we thank you for joining us. We're still working through things. I'm sure most of you just heard the conversation we were having. We know that we're in a little bit of a holding pattern until we get comments back from the department, but we still want to work on policy that will affect how we work together within subbasins and even across subbasin lines. We want to, open things up for landowners to help make themselves sustainable within their own operations. So those are the things we're trying to work on, and we're going to discuss a little bit today. So with that, I'll turn it over to Amir for the Tule Subbasin Update Annual Report, I through 1 through 3.
Yeah. Let me go through and just bring you up to make sure that everyone's up to speed. I think probably most of you are well aware of some of these items, but just in case, the annual report that's being prepared by Four Creeks is underway. They've asked for some additional information. The standard information on surface water, groundwater pumping, information like that from Tri-County, which Dan, I believe you've supplied almost all of it by now. The one thing that we're doing different, there's a couple things that we're doing different in this annual report. The GSA managers had expressed the importance of making sure that the document is completed in a more timely manner and enough time for us to review. And when I say us, I mean the GSAs to review and comment on. And so the idea this year is that there will be a review done much earlier, which we want to be able to share with this group and with the Tri-County board as well, so that everyone understands what actually is going into the document this year before we submit to DWR on April 1st. So Four Creeks and Tom Harder have agreed to do that. They are also working through some of the issues on how we're taking the ET data and calculating groundwater withdrawals from that. Tom was doing it a little bit differently. And as Deanna and I have worked through some of the basin safe issues with Four Creeks, there are several things that Four Creeks has agreed to do that are going to be incorporated into the annual report as well, in terms of how we're going to look at fallow lands and things of that nature. So I think what you're going to see in this year's report, our hope is that a lot of our concerns and comments from last year will be addressed this time around. And Deanna, please feel free to jump in or add anything.
No, that covers that really well.
Okay. DWR and the subbasin representatives have a quarterly meeting set up. I'm actually not the point of contact for the Tule subbasin, but I am for the Tulare Lake subbasin. And so I'm going to share some information with you folks from that meeting just because I was part of it and I want everyone to know. The key thing that came out of that meeting, of course, is that the department did reiterate that by the first week or second week of December, they expect to have comments out to us. It will be one set of comments per subbasin, which I'm sure that all of you are probably well aware of this, but and then there's going to be essentially one response. In the department's mind, and I specifically have asked this question a couple times to them, what they're hoping is they're going to get a revised document that's going to be a strikeout, and then adding the additional or new language just so it's clear to them where the changes are. They're not really looking for a response letter per se. They're really looking for the changes in the document that they're eventually going to approve. And by document, of course, I mean the GSP. So how and what that looks like when you have multiple GSPs, we still need to iron out with the department. So does every comment apply to all of us? We don't know. They haven't been clear on exactly what that's going to look like. So that's an ongoing conversation with them. But I think the important thing here to keep in mind is that our comments are probably going to be coming, as Deanna said a few minutes ago, within the next few weeks. And then our 180-day response time actually is going to start from the day that we turned in the GSP. So looking at the dates, and if there's multiple GSPs for a subbasin, the department said it was the date of the last one. So depending on when the last one was turned in for the Tule subbasin, that's the date that our 180 days response period is going to start. Having said that, it's not going to start any later than January 31st, of 2022. So you can all do the math and know that, hey, we've got 180 days to get something back to them. The responses do need to be approved by our individual boards. So there is going to have to be a special board meeting or such to approve the response document back to DWR. They didn't give any indication as to what they were thinking, of course. So we're looking forward to receiving that. The time period between December that we received the comments and the start of our official 180 days in January, we do have the ability then to go in and have a discussion with the department, talk about their comments, and ask them to clarify and get some further information. Of course, we can do that anytime during the response period, but they really are encouraging people to take advantage of that initial consultation and have those discussions with them. So once we receive comments, of course, we'll share them with you and determine what we need to do. That's both for the Tule side as well as the Tulare Lake side. On the Tulare Lake side, we did receive comments in Tulare Lake from the State Water Board. And what we've seen in other basins that the DWR has issued their letters on, they didn't follow the State Water Board exactly, but you could see that they definitely used it as a roadmap. And not just the State Water Board comment letters, but any other comment letters that they received as well. So having said that, there were two comment letters that we decided to respond back to that we thought maybe needed some additional clarification, because the information in those comment letters, over the last couple of years, obviously we've done a lot in Tri-County, and we wanted to make sure that the department was aware of that. And so we've have prepared response letters to the Lower Tule and Delano Early Mart letter, and as well as the El Rico letter that was received. And we've, are getting those uploaded. I believe I didn't check right before this call, but I believe there should be uploaded to the Sigma portal now. So please stop me if anyone has any questions or would like any clarification on anything that I've said. Like I said, some of you may already be well aware of some of these items. The third item that I do have on there is the draft proposal submittal that.
Amir, I have one question.
Oh, yes, sorry, Deanna. Yeah, wasn't
okay.
expecting that.
Because it is a strikeout and obviously an amendment to the documents, and we'll be, as Tri-County, we'll be amending 2 GSPs, one for our Tule and one for, and probably the coordination agreement for the Tule as well. So we'll have 3 documents. Do those documents then have a public review period before we turn them in at the end of that?
So someone did ask that question at the meeting, and the department, gave the usual department response, which is they always encourage, but there's no requirements for public comments. So there's no regulatory requirement for public comments on the responses.
Okay.
The 160 days, or excuse me, 180 days is going to be tight enough for us to get together and get these responses and get them approved and coordinated with all the other GSAs. That it's, the last thing we needed was to have a public comment period. But if we get them done early enough and we can take it out to public comment, great. If not, we'll have to make everyone aware that they'll be discussed at a board meeting, and we can consider that as a public comment meeting.
Thank you.
Okay, the draft PSP and guidelines. So as you guys all aware, and David, please feel free to jump in on this one. There's a considerable amount of money that's being made available to the subbasins. We had a public workshop yesterday with DWR, and it was interesting to say the least. DWR has also gone through and looked at the draft PSP, and they have, are going to be making some changes to it. Unfortunately, they had a presentation that is eventually going to be made available on their website, but when I checked this morning, it had not yet been made available. So our plan right now is to go through the draft PSP and make several comments on behalf of the Tulare Lake, and then we'll pass on some of those comments to Four Creeks. Don Tucker and I did talk afterwards, and and I told Don that I would send him some bullet items, whatever we decide to say in Tulare Lake, at least make sure that those concerns are voiced on the Tule side as well. There's about $152 million that's going to be made available to the critically overdrafted basins. If you do the simple math, it looks like there would be about $7.6 million available to each basin. These are non-competitive, which is awesome. We were all very super excited about that. We thought, okay, this is going to be great. We're going to have a bunch of money. But for the 11 basins that are critically overdrafted in the San Joaquin Valley, the legislation, not DWR, but the actual Budget Act itself, specifies that about 40 million of that has to go towards certain types of projects. And these are, and I'm summarizing these, of course, these are geophysical projects. These are flood management that incorporate groundwater recharge and floodplain expansion projects for, again, groundwater recharge or habitat. So there's a couple of problems with all of this. One being that the project had to be listed in your GSP.
Yeah.
Well, 2 years ago, when we were all writing our GSPs, none of us were thinking about these geophysical aerial magnetic surveys and things of that nature, right? So none of us included language to that effect. And then, and so there's several things like that that we are commenting on. We would all love for those requirements to go away, but unfortunately, it's the way it's written, it's in the legislation. And so we need to make sure that we find a way to try and comply with that. Again, that was the real gist of my call with Don Tucker with Four Creeks yesterday, was to try and see what we could come up with that might meet the requirements of, you know, these three specific items. I'm sorry that I'm jumping around a little bit, but the danger of this is that if you don't find the three, you know, projects that fit these three requirements, then potentially that $40 million of money that's set aside for the San Joaquin Valley could shrink to a smaller number, which meaning that we'd all get less than our 7.6 million. If you're a subbasin outside of the San Joaquin Valley, you're going to get your $7.6 million. But because of the way the legislation was written, we are stuck with this extra requirement, which I'm sure that the legislature probably thought that they were doing us a favor, but it's kind of handcuffed us a little bit, and we're all we're all scrambling to try and figure out how we're going to meet some of these requirements. So the other issue is that the comment period ends at the end of this month. They expect to have the final PSP done right before the Christmas holiday, right around the 20th or so. But then they want us to submit by January 31st. And any of you that were involved in the Prop 68 grant applications, you know, a year ago from now know how difficult that was, and how much we were all scrambling to get, you know, letters of support and all these types of things, you know, from various agencies. So again, we probably will ask the department to give us an extra month and hope that we can, you know, that extra month would be sufficient to give us time to breathe a little bit and coordinate our responses. There's a lot more details. I'm not going to get into all of them with this group, but David, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to what I said, or David, you're still muted.
You've covered it well, Amir, and we agree with your assessment. You know, there's definitely a catch-22 to this issue, unfortunately. And, you know, this requirement that it be listed, you know, as part of a GSP, and that others within that basin, you know, have to support it is challenging. So we have been looking into it as well. And in fact, we have a call later today to go over, you know, one of those. But there is no question that it's for what it originally seemed was proposed, that every basin would have an opportunity at that at least $7 million. Is much more challenging than we anticipated, which it definitely needs a legislative fix, but it's probably too late for this period, no question. But they didn't do us any favors when they thought they might have been.
Yeah, I agree with David. Any questions on that before we move on? If any of you, there's a link to the solicitation package in the agenda. So if any of you are interested in looking at the solicitation package and having comments, or would like to make sure that your thoughts or ideas are incorporated into the subbasin's response letter, you know, please look at it and get back to Deanna, and we'll pass that along to you know, to the subbasin. Tri-County Water Authority update. Deanna, is anything on Tri-County that you want to share on that one?
There's really nothing new. We are working on supplying the data for the annual reports, as we discussed earlier, to the subbasins. We moved the next board meeting back 1 week. So it will not be the first week of January, it'll be the second week of January on the Thursday, I believe that's the 13th at 1 p.m. So you can just note your calendars for that, and I think that's about it right now.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to what Deanna just said is similar to what you said about the board meeting on January 13th. You know, I scheduled a meeting for this group as a very tentative meeting on the 15th of December. And I'm honestly not sure that that's going to be the best date for all of you, but just something that you might want to think about between now and the end of this meeting and see if that's still something that we want to maintain or if we want to push it out to January. All right. Kathy, do you want to talk about the Lower Deer Creek watershed? Is there any updates on that you might want to share with the group?
Oh, we lost her, Amir.
Oh, we did. Oh, I didn't realize. Oh, okay. Well, if Kathy comes back on, we'll let her update us on that.
Okay.
On the DMS, Deanna, anything on Basin Safe?
I don't think there's anything new, although I will say that we've been working through a transfer groundwater allocation within Tri-County Water Authority jurisdictional limits. It is with legal right now for review. So if you are a landowner and you would like to transfer credits in Basin Safe from one account to another within Tri-County's boundaries, please contact us and we can get that form to you and work through that process. I think all of the other, we have been working through diligently the invoicing process. There have been a few bumps in the road with that, just trying to set it up in a way that it incorporates invoicing from before we had Basin Safe into Basin Safe and is calculating late fees and interest fees correctly. So if you receive a invoice and you think that there's an error to it, please contact us. But we've been reviewing each invoice pretty carefully and trying to make sure that they are representative of the correct numbers. So, and I think, you know, other than that, Basin Safe has been pretty smooth. Four Creeks has been very responsive whenever we have an issue or a landowner problem. They get back to us pretty quickly, and we've been able to resolve those fairly easily. So, is there any questions on Basin Safe or your accounts out there?
Yeah, Deanna, this is Mo. I got a question.
Sure.
On Basin Safe, or in the inner Tri-County transfers from one property to another, how does the transitional pumping part of it work? So if the Basin Safe says you have, you know, X number of acre feet that includes transitional pumping, then once that amount is transferred, what's the ramifications of that?
If it is, so sustainable yield transfers and it goes into the sustainable yield category. Transitional water can be transferred from one property to another. It is still considered transitional water, and it has the same rules applied to it. So it still has a 5-year shelf life. At the end of that 5 years, that transitional water resets, but it can be transferred from property to property within Tri-County Water Authority boundaries. It cannot be transferred outside of Tri-County Water Authority boundaries.
Okay, so if you have transitional water and you transfer it off, then the following year, the only amount that's going to be available to transfer from that same property to another property would be the sustainable yield, which is 0.34, correct?
It's 0.44. Sustainable yield.
Okay, and what's transitional pumping?
Once that credit leaves, it doesn't come back until the next 5-year allotment. Then that parcel will receive its next 5-year allotment again.
Okay. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Deanna, quick question. Those transfers within the Tri-County jurisdiction, do they follow the sub-basin line, being as there technically 2 GSAs? And
No, Tri-County's allocation policy allows transfer just within Tri-County's boundaries. So there's not a different policy for Tulare Lake versus Tule.
Thank you.
Okay, well, that's a pretty good segue then to the water accounting policy discussion, because we already started some of that, but one of the questions that's been coming up and something that we didn't include in the first draft of the policy, of course, is some of the groundwater credits issues. And so this is some discussions on if you have groundwater credits and recharge inside of Tri-County, we kind of talked about trading, the water, the transitional water, and your sustainable yield water. But in addition to that, if you have recharge projects within Tri-County, which realistically, there's not a lot of places we're going to, but there are a few places where recharge may occur. So Dan and I kind of started putting our heads together a little bit and started coming up with some ideas on what our requirements would be if you do have a groundwater recharge facility within Tri-County. And then the second part of that, of course, is and I think this is the more realistic part, and the part that we would really look for this group to help us with is when you start talking about doing groundwater credits and recharges outside of Tri-County. And so we had some of that discussions as well, and we wanted to kind of share that with this group. We started putting together some initial thoughts. Obviously, as usual, we took a look at what some of our neighboring GSAs have done on their policies for a variety of reasons. There's no reason to reinvent the wheel. There's also, it makes a lot of sense to make sure that our policies, as much as possible, start to match up with our neighbor GSA's policies, because as you all well aware, if you're going to do this, you might as well have, the simpler the set of rules, or more similar to the set of rules, the better for everybody, right? So we took a look at what Eastern Tule said in terms of their recharge within Eastern Tule, and we kind of modeled some language on that I'm going to show you here in a minute. And then secondly, we also started to take a look at what some of the folks I think it was mostly Porterville and a few of the others had in terms of how they're handling groundwater recharge credits for some of the things that are happening outside of the GSA. So there's a lot of issues that start to come into play in this discussion. The first and foremost, of course, is that you have to obviously comply with any of the requirements of the local district or the local GSA that you're recharging in. So if you are recharging in Lower Tule or something, any requirements, and I'm not talking about the GSAs per se, but even the district, any requirements that local GSA or district would have are obviously going to apply to any project that a landowner in Tri-County would on their project. So that's important to keep in mind. And as far as Tri-County is concerned, that discussion is between the landowner and that particular district or that particular agency. Once all we're interested in Tri-County from that standpoint is what the value of the water that can be traded is, and that's reported back to us. So if there's a 10% or 25%, whatever that number is, leave behind by that district, then it's the value minus that leave behind is what we're interested in. And again, Deanna, if jump in if there's anything you want to add as I'm going along here.
Sure. So I think what we're talking about is, if you participate in a water bank upstream of Tri-County Water Authority, you have two options there. You may transfer that water out of the bank and physically move it into Tri-County. Of course, that would be the best scenario for Tri-County, because that would be bringing physical water into the area and help balance, particularly in the southeast area. But if the water bank, where the water bank is, if that district and that GSA allows a credit transfer, then really Tri-County would be asking them what that transfer or what that credit amount is, and whatever they're willing to transfer out, we're willing to take in. And then we just have to build some parameters out of that, because we don't want to cause undesirable results by credit we're bringing in. So I think that's where the discussion is right now. So we'd gladly bring the credit in, and would gladly bring the physical water in. But then it just becomes, how do we design our rules around those credits coming in so that we don't exacerbate undesirable results?
So one of the things that that Deanna and I were also talking about is in what bucket in our in our accounting system would that recharge, and where would you get credit for that? And so the obvious one, if you're bringing in surface water, of course, we do have a surface water bucket. And but if you're doing groundwater recharge outside of the GSA, and we're looking at where we would credit you in our accounting system, so right now we're leaning towards crediting that as all as surface water. But again, we're very open to discussion, input, thoughts, ideas from this group. We've started to put together some initial thoughts on paper, but we wanted to at least have a discussion with this group and better understand what some of their concerns might be, or how to make this the most try to make this the most effective and attractive for our landowners as well. So let me open it up for some discussions, and then what we'll do is I'm going to maybe have some discussions on this first before I don't want to. I guess what am I trying to say here? I'm trying to make sure that we really capture your guys' thoughts and ideas on this, because doing recharge outside of Tri-County is probably the most realistic scenario that we have in order to bring in credits into this area and bring in water into the southeast area in particular.
What's the leave behind in Lower Tule?
I believe it's 20 or 25%. I'm not certain in Lower Tule. I know that in Porterville, it's 30%, I believe, leave behind. So, and that's what Amir and I were talking about earlier. It wouldn't be, if you're bringing the credit in, Tri-County is going to, we're not going to take a cut out of that credit coming in, because the leave behind would be with the rules of the district where it's coming out of. If it's moving out of Tri-County, then that's where we still have a discussion. We haven't set a policy as to what our leave behind would be. So,
just Deanna, for reference, Lower Tule and Pixley's leave behind is 10% if you use your own recharge basin. And it's 25% only if you use the district's recharge basin.
Right, right.
Thank you.
What's Kern County on all their banking? What's the leave behind? Do we know?
I don't
They
know
have
what
major bank,
Kern's Water Bank leave behind is.
it's probably 10%, I guess. I'll find out. It's a
Yeah.
that's a critical thing on outside, but Lemire, we did find Angiola Water District found one spot that sinks in Tri-County south of Deer Creek before Alpaugh. And, we'll be putting in a small surge cell in that area, but that's in Tri-County.
Yeah.
So when we have Deer Creek water coming in, anything that's not actually utilized will go into that sinking area.
Okay.
And Ken Schmidt located that. The majority of the acreage does not sink, but he found a spot that's kind of where old Leland McCarthy's house was, just north of it. So I'll take you down there one day, but
Yeah, that would be interesting.
yeah, we will be putting in a surge pond there this year, within the month.
So Mo or Adriana, any thoughts or that you might have on in terms of things that we should consider as we're putting together this policy of or Stacey Ann, on any of this, any thoughts or ideas on what the credit should look like for water, outside of Tri-County, the boundaries of Tri-County. We're the biggest concern that we have is we want to make sure that we avoid any undesirable effects from that pumping occurring in Tri-County, even though the recharge is occurring somewhere else. So we've been kind of going back and forth on how to try and figure out the best way to ask the monitoring for that. Mo, you're still muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, so what is an undesirable result for bringing water in that you guys are referencing?
Not for bringing water in, but if you were banking water somewhere outside of Tri-County and not physically moving the water, and so Mo, let's just say for the sake of discussion, you're banking, I'm going to make a number, 300 acre feet somewhere, and you're pumping that 300 acre feet additional in Tri-County, that would be above and beyond your sustainable yield and your transitional pumping. We want to make sure that that's not going to cause any undesirable results in Tri-County.
So I guess part of my question stems from the idea that, like Semi-Tropic has incorporated part of their logic is, if you're bumping over off of Garces Highway and you create an undesirable result of some subsidence around that local area, then what's no harm, no foul, because it's not hurting anybody. So is Tri-County looking at it the same way, or is it undesirable as undesirable, period?
Well, I think I have a kind of an answer to that, Amir. There's more than one undesirable result, and I'm just going to take the Southeast for an example. You're right. That area does not have significant infrastructure that would be affected by subsidence, other than possibly high-speed rail at some point when it goes through, and things such as wells breaking or that type of thing. But what you do have directly east of you is another GSA that could suggest that you're causing an undesirable result by dropping water levels, which is causing their imported water to migrate. So you know, you have water levels that you have to maintain. You have to maintain groundwater storage capability, and you don't want to cause undesirable results or cause your neighbor to not become sustainable. That's one of the issues. So all of those things would have to be monitored and watched. And I'm not saying that in a negative way. I still think those credits can come in there and be pumped. It's just, I think we have to be conscious of how many come in and how concentrated they are and what we're doing to set parameters around that.
So when you talk about setting parameters around that, what does that look like? What is the parameter around bringing in credits?
Well, it may be simply starting with when the credit comes in from outside of Tri-County, that you indicate where that water would be extracted at, and you allow groundwater levels to be monitored at that extraction area for some period of time, so that we can monitor whether that is causing an undesirable result or not in that area. I think that initially a lot of this would just be monitoring and data collection, but I foresee that there would be some sort of you'd have to have some parameters about how much credit could be paper credit transferred in and pumped out in one spot if no physical water is being moved into that area to replenish.
So then how do we realistically mitigate that issue? Because what I'm hearing is that unless we can physically prove that the water is coming into the basin or physically move molecules of water into the basin, we're screwed.
Well, no, Mo, I don't think we're saying that. I think there may be a limit to the amount of credits that we can do on any on an annual basis. So I'm just going to make, again, these are just made up numbers, but we might just say that the amount of credits that are paper credits might be a value X. And we work with with the evaluators, the hydrogeologic evaluation, and say, okay, we can really pump this much more without causing the undesirable results that we're hoping to avoid.
Okay, so when are those rules going to get established so those of us that are trying to get something done can actually count on some rule being a consistent factor here?
Yeah. So that's part of this discussion today is, Dan and I are working on putting together a draft to share with this group. We certainly understand that you guys want to see that, but we also want to make sure that we incorporate any of your comments and concerns as well. And so that's what we're trying to gather up today and then try to get something to you before our next meeting in December. And have a draft out for this group to at least evaluate and consider and talk about in more detail. But the fact that we're thinking about this policy, we want to make sure that everybody has a chance to weigh in as we're kind of preparing the draft.
And I know I'm a broken record on this, but really, when the comments come from the department, it could change the trajectory of what we're doing in some respects.
Yeah.
So we're kind of we've been in a little bit of a wait and see until they come back. Because if they come back and say that what we've set forth in the southeast area for our plan is not acceptable, then we have a whole other set of issues to manage moving forward, or anywhere in Tri-County. I don't mean the southeast is particular. It could be anywhere in Tri-County or the sub-basin as a whole. So, but we do want to put together a policy that works for landowners. It's just we always have to be mindful if we're going to cause an undesirable result going forward. If we're going to cause the basin to be unsustainable in a way, then we have to set parameters around what can happen.
And it's not all, keep in mind that this isn't all on negative, we also, as I started to say, we want to encourage this as much as possible, because any water brought into the area and recharged in the subbasin, a rising tide lifts all boats. We've said that a million times, right? So there are some huge benefits to the subbasin as a whole. We just want to be realistic with ourselves that we don't cause a problem where there's a lot more fingers pointing at Tri-County. But we want to balance that with trying to encourage this type of activity, more recharge. But when I say the word recharge, I mean conjunctive use as well. So if you have surface storage, if you have in lieu recharge, all of that is a positive. In fact, the PSP that David and I were talking about earlier, conjunctive use projects are covered in that money. And so, or at least in a portion of the money. That would be something that we as a GSA would want us to encourage. So I don't want to, we always end up on the negative side, but we also want to write this policy in a way that encourages this type of behavior. I don't think Mo, you're buying what I'm saying here.
I really appreciate the position that you and you're trying to do with setting rules and then being damn slow about implementing them, or setting up guidelines, and then we got landowners like ourselves that are trying to figure out how we're going to survive. And if you're not proactive, then you're going to be dead in the water, because by the time all the rules get set, there's going to be no water left, or no way to get deals done. So you either got to do it and hope for the best, but it doesn't make a whole lot of economic sense to do it that way. You're basically playing a hunch at that point, and we're talking about millions of dollars, and it's hard to justify. So I apologize for my frustration, but I guess I'm just voicing what everybody else is thinking.
Stacy Ann or Adriana, do you want to, either one of you want to add any thoughts or ideas or suggestions?
Nothing from me.
Here, I don't have anything at this time, at least.
Okay, great. So as we kind of said, the idea here is to actively encourage, these types of projects. Whatever rules someone else has set, you all understand those apply, and that's fine. So why don't Dan and I put our heads back together? We try to come up with a draft to share with this group, and have that discussion for our next meeting, which tentatively right now I've got set for December 15th. Is that what I said, Dan?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. But let's at least, and as you think about this some more, and I understand, most point is that you want a consistent set of rules, and you want them implemented early, because it's hard to move forward on projects, as Mo mentioned, without that knowing exactly what the rules are. And that's what kind of prompted us to kind of say, hey, we need to make sure that we've got these rules in place for you, and that if you know what they are, then you can work around them, or not work around them, but work with them, I should say. So yeah, let us put something together, and get back to this group, and really start to, and again, if you have some thoughts, call Deanna, and I really need to turn that off. And get Deanna some, any of those thoughts, or call myself, and I'll be happy to, see what we can do to incorporate that. All right. Second item, if there aren't anything else on this, and we'll keep moving along here, Deanna, we probably get done early today. In our last meeting, which was 2 months ago now, we had put together a kind of our thoughts on a objective and goals for our land repurposing policy. And I wanted to see if any of you had any comments or any feedback on at least that. Once we're comfortable that that's kind of what we're all working towards, and we're going to start putting some more meat on the bones in terms of the policy, and trying to come up with more details and how we would go, move forward on actually implementing that policy. And have enough in place that we are hoping to apply for, appropriate money and grants as they become available, for any land repurposing that might occur. And just so that all of you know, where and in what direction we're headed on that idea as well. Stacy, could you do me a favor and maybe pull up that policy just real quick to share with the group? And anybody who doesn't have a copy of it or would like another copy, please reach out to myself or Stacy directly, and we'll be happy to provide you with a copy of this. But the idea here was, really, like I said, to put some of the objectives of the program out there and make sure that they are in line with what with all of what you would all like to see with this program. We are trying to, we were trying to make it as broad as we could. Boy, I don't know what it is. Apparently every single person I know has decided to call me during this meeting. But yeah, so like I said, if any of you need another copy of this policy, please, or this draft objectives, I should say. It's not a policy, it's just some objectives. Please reach out to me or Stacy Ann, and we'll be happy to share that with you and get you a policy, get that. But the idea here again is to get your input, and then we'd like to start, preparing a policy based on your input. I don't know if anyone had a chance to look at this or had any thoughts on it, or want to send me an email with your thoughts later if if that works better for you. It's a quiet group today, Deanna.
Sorry about that. I was thinking, I also wanted to let people know that this draft land repurposing policy is linked on our website as well. So we put a projects list in, but I had Mark talking in my ear, so I missed a little bit of what you were talking about. I'm sorry. Oh,
no, that's okay. I was just trying to encourage everyone to get us their input on this so that we can finalize the, and start to put some more meat on the bones for the policy as well.
Hey, Mayor, can you just real quick give me the Reader's Digest version of the land repurposing? What is that program? What does repurposing mean?
Yeah, so the idea here is, if land goes out of production, this is any current or former agricultural land. If it's taken out of ag production, what are we basically saying is going to happen? What happens to the water? What happens, to that? And Stacy Ann, if you can just scroll down just a little bit. Yeah, thank you. So the idea here, of course, is, we want to avoid undesirable results, And we want to make sure that that land gets reused for, when I say, I shouldn't have used the word undesirable results. We want to, not from just a Sigma standpoint, of course, there's the undesirable results from a Sigma standpoint, but there's also community impacts. And so we want to make sure that there's something out there to encourage, repurposing that land for some other use. It could be habitat restoration, parks, solar, something along those lines, right? And then we want to look at, what kind of funding opportunities might be available either through the state or through potentially the GSA as well. And kind of talk a little bit about some of those funding opportunities and how, how you would like to see some of those funds spent. There's a discussion, at least internally, we have some pumping fees that we're collecting, and we're looking at those, and we have some limitations on where and what we can spend those on. Because of some of the legal requirements, but we want to see if potentially land repurposing may be one of those projects that we might be able to spend some money on. So there's essentially, that's the short version, Mo.
So let me just ask a direct question. And so if we're going to take land out of ag use and turn it into a pond for infiltration, would that qualify for the repurposing?
Oh, that's a good question.
It likely would.
Yeah.
So in some respects, that's the purpose of working on this. We can design land repurposing strategy and program around where we see, the best uses of land within Tri-County would be. And then the state and funding opportunities are there. They are forming those right now. There are many discussions, and so I'm closely watching those discussions. And as we build this out, we will mirror what the way we can best leverage whatever funding we put in to leverage funding from the state and help landowners do some of these activities, right? Whether that be taking a parcel out and putting it to solar, or taking a parcel out and returning it to natural habitat, or a recharge basin, or whatever it is. And again, we have the unfortunate position of not having good areas for recharge, but there are still things that we can repurpose land to and get some bang for the landowner's buck, so to speak. And with these fees coming in, we do want to design things that are helpful to landowners, that will help them in the long term. So these type of programs may well be, at one of the tools that we can use.
So then back to the point of recharge, and there's not, other than the parcel that Mark identified earlier, there's not a lot of land in Tri-County that is good for recharge. So we're going to be looking at recharge facilities outside of Tri-County's GSA territory, basically. Would these funds still be able to be applied there?
I don't know the answer to that. It would likely be if it is in a different GSA, it's whatever program they would put in place. I don't think that Tri-County could expend funds from Tri-County in another GSA area, but it can certainly be investigated.
That's a very good question, Mo. Yeah, we definitely need to look into that and see if there's a way to make that happen, and if that's even feasible, or even some of the legal issues. It's a good question. Stacey Ann, you turned your camera back on. Was there something you wanted to add?
I did. You may or may not be aware of this, but there was, I'm going to get the number wrong, 50 million in the budget for multi-benefit land repurposing that's going through
Yeah.
Department of Conservation, and the process to develop those rules and regulations is in place, or is being done right now. And that would be something to look at too, as a funding to make your money go longer. However, that program will likely have some pretty strict definitions of what multi-benefit is. So like a recharge pond would have to also be habitat, community benefit, or something like that.
So our hope is that there may be multiple funding opportunities like Stacey Ann just mentioned, and some things may be covered under some of the state monies, but other projects or potential things that wouldn't be, might be covered under GSA monies. And again, there's a lot of, caveats that come with that as well. But these are great ideas and suggestions that, that we probably need to look into. And this is why we have these, this is why this committee exists. This is a perfect reason why the committee exists, to have these types of ideas thrown out at us and make it, leave it up to us to try and figure out how to make it work and try to do something that might be beneficial to everyone.
On that kind of note, Merritt, there's also a lot of the land in Tri-County would be prime habitat land if it has to be repurposed. And so you may even be eligible. I don't know. You would have to figure out if the area is eligible for it, but you may even be eligible for some mitigation credits in this area, just because there is so much prime habitat.
That's
or
a very
potentially
good
prime
point.
habitat.
Yeah. That's part of the reasons that Kathy, we always love having Kathy on these calls, is she's way more up on things like that than I am, on mitigation credits and things of that nature. And if, and as you mentioned, Stacey, in that multi-benefit use, you can, it becomes a lot more attractive if you get some mitigation credits out of it as well. David, do you have any ideas on where that where conservation might be on some of these regulations, or do you have someone on your staff that might be able to give us an update from conservation?
I'll check in on that.
Okay.
I know that Ted Harris on our team in Sacramento watches that pretty closely.
Okay.
I have to check in with him on that. We've been really, focused lately on, like you've been discussing, what potential monies are out there in terms of these programs. And so I'll do a follow-up on that, Amir.
Yeah, no, thank you. I'll just take this opportunity to mention real quickly that Cal Strategies did put together a matrix of some of the funding opportunities across the whole variety of state government agencies that are out there right now. And that they, on behalf of Tri-County, they kind of put that together so that we could kind of make sure that we keep that in mind as we're looking at all the different ways to make some of these projects work. And, there's a lot. Reading that Budget Act, which, authorized the $152 million for Sigma, is, man, I started reading through that and I was like, I'm gonna get David's job and become a lobbyist, because man, some of these people obviously had some nice little cutouts for themselves. There was like some, I don't know, $25 million for a new firefighting facility in the city of Fresno or something like that. And I was like, wow, it's good to have connections, apparently. So I was just, no offense, David, but I was just laughing at some of those things as I was reading that act.
I know there's definitely pork in there, it's with the legislators that have the power to get it. But there are also a lot of, good programs, and there's more to come. That's the interesting thing, is we still don't know yet quite a bit about the infrastructure deal. We hear round numbers, but inside those round numbers is where the mysteries are going to be solved. But there definitely should be. I mean, we've been yelling and screaming in Sacramento about the conditions. Every time there's an article, we forward them to everybody down up in Sacramento in regards to the subsidence issues and the disadvantaged communities. And we're really trying to bring attention to that. We've been hounding, and I say this on almost every report, but we've been hounding Secretary Crowfoot regularly. And as you know, we even had the chance to speak specifically about it directly with the governor less than a month ago. And so we do fight, obviously, the enviros in a certain area, and of course the salmon in the Sacramento River. But we've been getting the ears, so we're just still fighting. But it's tough. Although I must say that we're thinking that there is going to be quite a bit more money next year.
And on that note, if you are a landowner or talk to a landowner within Tri-County Water Authority and you think you have a concept of a private project that you would like to go after public funds for, please get with me and let's get listed on the website. Those projects are not in the GSP, and I don't know if they will be eligible for this round of funding on that because it's on a website. But eventually these things, they have to have a mechanism to fund these projects, and we want to get them listed and get them eligible. So even if they're conceptual, you have a project within Tri-County and you'd like to see public funds become available to you, let's get them listed.
The current PSP does a lot. Oh, go ahead, Mo.
I was going to say, what's it take to get listed for a private project, quote unquote?
General description, area, and how far the project is along, or if it's just conceptual, but just a general description and write-up, and we can get a name to it and list it on the website.
Okay, and then does it have to be a Tri-County's Water Authority territory again, back to the recharge projects? That there is no real.
Well, that is really the only area I have, jurisdictional area over. So if it's in another GSA, we'd have to work in conjunction with them.
Okay, Dan, I think that's all I have for today. Maybe we can let people out a little early. I think we just have to decide if we're going to meet on the 15th.
It's a pretty small group today, Amir.
I know.
Would this group like to meet on the 15th, or would you like to push it off to January, to the new year? Let's put it to the group.
I think the 15th would be a good idea, because the more we meet, the more movement we get on a forward basis. So I'm all for meeting on the 15th.
Okay, that sounds good. We'll meet on December 15th, and before that meeting, we're going to get out some bullet points on this transfer policy, what we're thinking, and that way we'll have that paper for discussion at the December 15th meeting.
Stacey Ann, were you going to add something to the date, or?
No, I was just going to suggest that it would probably be a good idea, being as you're expecting DWR's letter in that 2 weeks.
Yeah, that letter, as Deanna said, once that letter hits from DWR, we don't know what kind of changes, or what if that's going to refocus everything for us, and how much of those comments may apply to Tri-County. So, all right, the 15th, 10 to 11:30, similar time. Stacy Ann always does a great job of getting everything out. We'll get a draft put together on this transfer policy and get that out to all of you for your comments. And you all know by now, I've said this a million times, that we very much value and appreciate your guys' comments and when we're putting these drafts together. So any other thoughts you have, please get them to Deanna as well.
I just want to say I can't take credit for Stacy Wilkinson's good work.
We're mixing up Stacy's, huh?
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, thank you so much, and happy Thanksgiving. I hope you all enjoy that time, and we'll look forward to meeting again on the 15th.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.